Hi everyone. In this short talk I want to talk a little bit about mathematics. And the reason this is important is this is the substance of what we're teaching. We're here as mathematics teachers, and in senior maths it's really important we have an understanding of what we're teaching. You'll understand in a minute. So my first question is, what do you think maths is? How would you describe it? Can you describe it? Can you define it? In the discussion board, what we want you to do is write a paragraph to outline what do you think mathematics is about. And maybe you can stop the video and do that now. And once you've done it, maybe read the views of others and how they compare to your own view. The reason I asked you to do this is you're maths teachers. You've studied maths at least for 12 years at school. You've studied it at university. So you, more than anyone else, should know what mathematics is, what it's about, what's involved in it. You should be able to describe it. And yet, for most of us, it's really difficult. So this is not to be critical of you, but just hopefully get you to think and reflect about what you might think the answer would be to that. And then my other question is, after sitting in your maths class for years, how do you think your students would describe it or define it? Now, my other question is, and I've asked this other times too, what do you like about maths? You're spending a lot of your life, you're committing your life to maths and teaching kids about maths. So you must love it in some ways. And when you say you love it, what do you mean? Often when I ask people this, they say, oh, well, I love doing activities like quilting or this other activities which are sort of mathematical. And they say maths is all around us. Everything's got maths in it. But the funny thing is that's not the sort of stuff I see in maths classes. I see something quite different. So is school maths something quite different from maths that the rest of the world does? If I asked a mathematician at a university what mathematics is, I wonder what they'd say. How do they engage in maths? Now, there's often myths about mathematicians sort of being lonely, stuck away in a little office by themselves, playing on their calculator all day. And it could be hard, couldn't be further from the truth. I've met many mathematicians, I've worked with mathematicians, and they're very community people. They solve things together. They do a lot of work collaboratively. They don't just sit isolated away in their office. In fact, a lot of them rarely use a calculator, to be honest. But they do work in teams, and they're very emotional. When they discover something, they get quite excited. And I remember being with one time when he saw a pattern in some data, and he almost started jumping up and down with excitement. Maybe a little eccentric, but certainly excitable. So what do you find about maths that's interesting and fascinating and enjoyable? Again, this is something you could comment on in the discussion board. Now, very quickly, I just want to say what some of students' views are of mathematics. The first thing is, particularly if you asked any student, junior high school perhaps, but even the senior ones I dare would say the same thing. They say maths is about numbers. And if you wonder why students start to get different views of maths or don't like it a bit more when they get to about grade 7 or 8, well, one of the things I say is all of a sudden I thought maths was about numbers and now you've made it about letters. So it gets a bit confusing for them. Students say you either have a maths brain or you don't. And after they say that, they say, and I don't. Now this is a problem because firstly, it's not true. There's nothing about people's brains that makes them any more or less mathematical. There's no such thing as far as we know as a maths brain. There's certainly true that some people seem to have more inclination towards that way or find it easier sometimes, but there's nothing to say that anyone can't learn mathematics. And this is the funny one, they all say maths is very, very important. But it's also dull and boring, and it's irrelevant to real life. Now, the interesting thing about these views is they probably learnt them at school, in our maths classes. And I'm pretty sure none of you have an objective written at the top of your lesson plan or your unit plan, teach the kids to think that maths is boring. So why do they learn it? How do they learn it? Teach the kids that maths is irrelevant and useless. How do they learn that? Because if we think about the classes, this is what they've learned. It's not necessarily what we've tried to teach them, but that's what they've learned. And therefore that's important. So a little bit about maths. There was a book a long time ago which talked about maths being the servant and the queen of sciences. And by this servant, mathematics as queen, it meant maths is the queen or the prime of all sciences. The argument was if you boil any science down in the end, it's mathematics. Mathematics is the supreme one because it's the most pure of all the sciences. Maths is beautiful, it's fascinating and it's interesting. And again, my question is, particularly in your senior maths class where you've got your students who are the most committed to maths and are most likely to go on with a mathematics-based career and learning at higher education, is this what they learn in your class? That maths is beautiful, fascinating and interesting. Now, how you do that, it will depend on the kids you teach, your personality, what you find interesting. But certainly if you don't find maths interesting at all, I'd question why you've chosen to spend the rest of your life teaching it. Here's some simple examples you might find. Some of you would have read this book. It's a little bit old now, so you probably can get it for a couple of bucks at the second-hand bookshop. But this includes parts about Fibonacci sequence and the golden section. This book now, which has also become a play, has a whole part in it about, has various mathematical parts in it, but it certainly has the Monty Hall problem in it. But my question again is, if maths is the queen of sciences, why is it that so many students don't get a buzz from it or don't see it as exciting at all? What's the implication for our maths teaching if maths is the queen of science and is interesting and fascinating and beautiful? Surely that's something they should see in our classes. And what about the curriculum? Now we also know that maths is the servant. So the title of the book was Servant and Queen. And what we mean by this is maths is useful. And mostly these days we call this numeracy. Numeracy is the ability to use and the inclination to use mathematics effectively at home, at work and in the community. Now this just doesn't apply to primary school or junior secondary school. This applies equally in our senior maths classes. All the maths in the senior maths curriculum is useful in some way. Now I'm not saying that every child or all of us are going to use it every day, but someone and people around the world are using it. Even a topic like complex numbers, which seems quite bizarre and abstract, is essentially very useful. So maths is both servant and queen. Why is it that most of the students who finish schooling, including those who choose to do senior maths and apparently like and partake in maths of their own volition at a high level, why is it that they think it's useless and dull? Where have they learned it? In our maths classes. Who taught them? We did. So what does it mean for us when we teach? Now, I've just put up here a little quote from the Maths B syllabus, just to show you that there's a whole range of things where they talk about maths being useful and interesting and beautiful. So it's not an optional extra to say, oh, I'm going to teach the kids the content, and if I get a chance, I'll help them to see these things here. You can see it says there that maths is a unique and powerful way of viewing the world. It's a way of investigating patterns. It's a way of thinking. It's powerful. It's creative. This is not optional extra. This is what the students are supposed to learn in this case, in Maths B. So if the kids finish the year and they can differentiate and integrate, they can do trig identities, they can do all sorts of things, but they think that maths is useless and they don't see it as being interesting or solving any real problems, then you haven't actually taught them the curriculum, which is mandated by law. Okay, so this is word for word out of Maths B. So here's my reflective questions for the discussion board. What do you think maths is about? This is what we asked earlier. Is this the subject that you teach in class? So you say, if I asked you what maths is about and you say, oh, it's about patterns and the ways of understanding the world and all this sort of stuff, is that what it looks like in your class? Is that what your students would say it's about in your senior maths class? It's worth thinking about because this is what you've dedicated your life to, a career of teaching this stuff. So thanks for watching and thinking about these ideas. I hope it's provoked you to think about it in some different ways and helps you in your journey towards being a really awesome secondary school maths teacher.